I do a lot of artistic boxes, and I spend a lot of time on my designs. I spend a lot of time on the finish, and I pride myself on how it looks. Well, nothing can ruin a box more than having a hinge that doesn't look correct inside of the box. And hinging has always been well, I've always been afraid of it. So what I decided to do is create a program to make a template to make it easier for me to hinge. And I use a lot of different size hinges. I use, a 7, 8, 6, 4. I use 2 hinges. I use 3 hinges on some of my boxes. So I try to make templates for each one of those type of hinges. And not only that, some of the hinges, depending upon the manufacturer, are different sizes as far as the width is concerned. So that requires a different size template as well. So what we're going to do today is describe a program on how I make these templates. And this particular one is a 7-inch template that I use to create this particular piano hinge. Now the software is pretty simple. Well, the use of the software is pretty simple. It took me quite a while to come up with all of the variables here, but I use a 3/4 inch piece of wood, and I use 1/4 inch plexiglass, and from that I make my templates. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate the program and show what it does.
Today, we are going to use a program I created called Shape Creator. I use this program to create trays for my artistic boxes, as well as bottoms, puzzles, mounts for stepper motors, and well, a lot of things you can cut with a laser. But today, we will be concentrating on the Template tab. This tab will be used to generate templates that I use for cutting hinges on boxes. All hinges have similar characteristics. They have width and depth, and some of them have rounded corners versus square corners. Mounting these hinges is always a challenge. So I designed this part of the program to create the required templates. Usually, a hand router is used with a bushing and bit to follow the outlines of a template. So the two measurements that are key here are the size of the bushing and the size of the bit. You can input any dimensions on the tab in either metric, the default, or by appending the quote mark for inches. Today, we will be making a template for this box. We start by measuring the box and seeing what the dimensions of the hinge will be. The box is a bit less than 6 inches, and I will be using a 4 inches piano hinge, that is 7/16 of an inch wide. With a 6-inch box, the template needs to be at least 6.5 inches wide, so let's input that. Next, we will enter the width of the box. Then we will enter the width of the hinge. I like to use a number 6 or 8 screw for the template, so we can select that from the pull-down list. So the template is looking good now, but let's add in a few features. With a round bit, you cannot get a square corner for the hinges. That means that you have to use a chisel to cut the square corners to fit the hinge. And that is okay. But for what we want to do, we can check this box, and a slight round indent will be generated. That indent will allow us to place a hinge without any further work, and it doesn't detract too much from the look and finish. I have learned that it would be better to balance the router totally to get a better finish, so let's check this box. What it does is creates a hole that we can fit the router in, balancing the router better. I will demonstrate both after we build them. All that is left to do now is output the design to the laser program. We chose the Export tab, and make sure our settings are okay for acrylic. Then press the Export button. We can export the design in various formats. Lightburn, DXF, SVG or RDWorks native format. For this example, we will go directly to Lightburn. So we press this button, then select Create. The file will be generated and sent to Lightburn. When the Lightburn program is brought to the top of the display, we can see our template. The smaller object on the right is a test block that you can use to verify that the settings for power and speed are correct before committing to a good acrylic piece. And yes, you can make the template out of plywood, but I find that the acrylic is much better.
Okay, so we got our hinge already made. This is it over here, all cut out, ready to go. So one of the first things you want to do is, once you get your piece of wood, just roughly put it out here, put it to the edge. This isn't too critical, and just mark the location of where it's going to go. And the next thing you want to do, let's see if I got it. Yep, there it is about in the center over here. You know, put a center punch because that's where you're going to put your, drill your hole. Okay. And I selected a pretty good size one, so I'm going to use the 5/32 bit and just a couple holes here. All right, and let's get that off. And now we're going to start putting the screws on. So I'll put a little bit of wax on the screws that makes them go in a little bit easier. And we'll just start them off by putting one on that side. And repeating process for the other side. Well, this wax is getting old, but it works pretty good. So let's put this screw on here. Now you don't want to snug them down yet. Now I put it like this and just tighten the screws up on both sides. And voila, that should be it. That's our jig. Now it's flush with the back of the wood, and these are all the parameters that I need. Now what we can do is we can test it on a piece of scrap wood to make sure that everything's right. And this part of the wood over here has to be cut out, and that will be automatic when I put the bit in there. So I'm going to set it up over here and then we'll come back. Okay, in this next part we're going to go ahead and show you what's happening here. So we're going to do a test cut, and you notice that this is the bushing right over here. So we measured the size of this bushing and I got a 1/4 inch bit, and I know that using a 1/4 inch acrylic piece, that this bit here has to be 7.75 millimeters from the base. So to the top of here to the base is 7.75 millimeters. All right, now this will be a little bit noisy, but we're going to go ahead and route this piece. Okay, let's just make sure that this whole area here is cleared out. Okay, let's put this back in again. All right, now let's see what happens here. So I'm going to turn it around. I think you can see what's looks here. This is the hinge, and voila, perfect. Absolutely perfect. So that's what we want. Now this little cleanup here, you can either clean it up using sandpaper, which I don't use too often. And I cleaned that up pretty good. Or you can use a chisel, your choice. But without a chisel, I have now cut a nice little hole, and this fits in perfect. I can turn it around for you to see. Perfect, absolutely perfect. Okay, so the next step is to actually do the box. And that's not difficult at all. So let's go ahead and try that. Now for this part, you want to get as accurate as you possibly can. So I got my good old calipers out. And what you're trying to do here is find the center of the box. So what we are at is 151.96. 0.96 divided by 2 equals, 151.96 divided by 2 equals 75.98. So I'm going to set this to 75, as close as 98 as I can. You don't have to be exact. There we go. 99 is good enough. So I'm going to measure from this side here first and make a mark. And I'm going to measure from that side there and make a mark. So what that ends up doing is we end up having a center point. Let's try that again. I don't like these marks. Too many marks. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so 75.98, one mark. And let's go from this side and make another mark. Okay, that looks pretty good. See, they're really, really close together over here. Okay, so the second next step we do is we take our jig and we clear it out and we align the mark as close as we can. Now it's not going to stay by itself, so I have, and just get it really close like that. Now if this other end is tight, you don't need another clamp, but sometimes I'll put another clamp on this side. Alright, once that's in place, I'm now ready to route it. So we'll go ahead and route it. And let's see, there's a little bit left over here. Okay, that looks good. So take our clamps off. And it should be hinged. Now you notice all this little stuff here, and like I says, if you just put a little sandpaper on it, you'll take all that off. Here we go. Now we can put our hinge on, and let's see what happens. Again, perfect. Oh, all this dust in here. Okay, let's see what we want to do next is we want to do our points here. So we'll just do that and then we'll do that. All right, now you can see the two marks for, and I use a smaller, I wouldn't use a regular center punch, I just use one of these sharp awls I have and make a mark there, make a mark there. Okay, that's my drill, and for drilling I use a 5/64 of an inch. So I do the same thing, 5/64 of an inch, do my drills, and always rub off the mark here because otherwise you're going to forget it and it's going to look pretty tacky. And then I'll screw it in, and we'll come back after I screw that one in. Okay, so now it's all in. The screw seems to work it seems to work pretty good. I got some wax in here I still got to get rid of it because I use the wax to make sure everything is, the screws go in nice and don't break. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to mill the top using the same template, and we're going to see what happens. So we're going to do the top now of this particular box. So you'll notice that it's thick enough that the screws aren't going to go through it. And you got to make sure that we're going to do the correct side. So we're going to be doing this side, which is the top of the box. And the same thing holds true. We're going to measure first. And we're going to get an approximate number, which is 157.09 divided by 2 equals 78.5. So let's go to 78. As close as 0.5 as we're going to get. Ooh, we're way out almost. So again, we put our thing in there. We do a mark left. We put this in here, and we do a mark right. Let's see how close we are. Right on. That's good. I like to have it right on. Okay. Now the next step is to do the routing. So I have to reset up the jig just a little bit differently here. So give me a second. So to do this, I use a vise. And what we're going to do is I put the template in the vise. I also have a soft protective layer that's going to protect the piece. And then I put the piece in the correct way and put her in. And I'm adjusting it for the center, or as closest to the center. I press down as hard as I can, and I tighten the vise up. Okay, now that doesn't mean it's not going to move, but this is pretty good in there. Now we do the routing. Okay, I think that did a good job. So, pull it out, take a look at it, put our sandpaper on it. Okay, and we're now ready for our next step, the final fitting. Let's see, okay, so we're cut. And we can grab a pencil, and what we see is this works. Now if I put it in here, I should have an even amount on each side. And I noticed that there's a little bit off, but I'm not going to worry about it too much because I don't think it matters. So now I do the same thing. I do my marks. Okay, and I have my 2 marks. I take my little doohickey thingy. Make my mark there. Make my mark there. Drill my 2 holes, making sure I don't go too deep. A Purple Heart is really hard. So you have to be very careful when you put the screws in. You definitely need to have the wax on there. So okay, and get my little screws. They're pretty small, and put the wax on. you know, that fitting looks pretty good. And then do the next one. It's not all that hard, and it only takes a few minutes to do this now. All the worry is gone. Okay, I'm going to clean it up later. Close it, check it, perfect. I don't see any problems with it. This is nice. Okay, see? Hinge is complete. And you can see from the back, you know, how it lines up pretty good. So, I think this is a job complete. These are just some of the hinges that I made with the tool. So, this is a 4-inch hinge, this is a 4-inch hinge. The only difference that you can see probably, let's get some contrast here, is on this one it's rounded. So what you end up here is you have to use the chisel to chisel out the corner to make it square. Now this is the same 4-inch hinge template, and you'll notice that there's this little indent over here. So what that indent does is it lets the router bit get in here and in here. Now when you put in the hinge, you don't have to chisel it out anymore. Is it the prettiest one in the world? Well, it's not bad. And I don't know if you can see this, but we'll try to get as close as we can to this. You can see that there's just a slight rounding in there. Just enough that you can see it, but it's not terrible. So I'm happy with those. And it sure saves a lot of time and effort without having to do the 4 chisels for each one of the corners. Thank you for watching. Any questions, ask.